going to invite Ms. Sihem Amer-Yahia to the stage. Sihem holds a PhD in computer science and is a research director at the Centre national de la Recherche Scientifique at the Laboratoire d'Informatique de Grenoble. So, Sihem, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me out in the back? Yes? Okay. All right, so I'm going to stand here. So we have, since we have a little bit of time, I'm going to introduce myself. So my name is Sihem Amer-Yahia, and I was born and raised here. And I went to school here. And I went to what used to be called Lini. I think it's called Lazy. And one of my former professors is here. So, of course, I'm absolutely delighted of being here. I'm really excited. It's fantastic. So, I went to France for my master's and PhD. And then I went to the US, and I did most of my career in labs, industrial labs in America. So it was AT&T labs and Yahoo labs at the time. And then I went to Qatar, and Professor Ada mentioned QCRI, so I was part of the team who started QCRI. I had a team in social computing, so hopefully I'm going to tell you a little bit about social computing. And then I joined CNRS, that's the Centre national de Recherche Scientifique in France, and I've been there for 3.5 years. Okay? So today I'm going to tell you about something that everyone knows about, the web. Okay? And I titled my presentation, Putting People to Work on the Web. Okay? Next, please. All right, so this is pretty much a summary of what I'm going to tell you about. The context of this talk is going to be the evolution of the web from being a technology platform, right? You know, what it was designed for initially, to becoming a place where people have changed roles and have become major actors of the web. So initially, as a technology platform, users on the web were consumers, content consumers, right? So think of it as, you know, like Google search, but like the simple Google search, the early Google search, right? Where you enter a query, and then the system is going to figure out what information to serve you, right? And you consume that content. In the past 10 years, the web has evolved from being a technology platform to a social milieu, right? Where people have started becoming active, and they now have at least two roles, right? They're content consumers, as they used to be, but they're also content generators, right? So content generators meaning, you know, generating all sorts of information, mainly subjective information, so user ratings, comments, posts, exchanges with other users, and we all know about, you know, Facebook and Twitter. I also mentioning here IMDb, that's a movie reviewing site, and of course WebPlease, that's sort of a local customer-to-customer site, right? So a lot of the content, right, is traditional content that's also mixed up with user-generated content, right? And more recently, crowdsourcing has become, you know, an online destination for people to find work, right? To find something to do on the web. And as a result, users are now consumers, producers or providers or content generators, but they're also workers, okay? And when they work, they actually complete tasks that are called microtasks. These are very small tasks, and I'll show you examples of that. And these microtasks are much easier to do by humans than by machines, such as recognizing somebody on a picture, right? In order to be able to do that, right, a human being can do it just in a split of a second, right? Whereas a machine has to develop these very sophisticated algorithms to be able to do image recognition. Next slide, please. So I really have to show you this because this is actually just a point to make, to say that the web had become ubiquitous, and the social web in particular. I was traveling for a while and I didn't have time to call my parents for a few days. I completely forgot. I was quite busy. It was a time when we were setting up QCRI. And I was spending a few days at MIT, and we had a lot of work. And my parents hadn't gotten any news, and my father was asking about me, and they said, just go on Facebook, right? So Dad went on the web, and he figured that he needed to create an account. So he created an account, and he posted this thing, and said, this thing says, we can follow you, where are you? We're all doing well, okay? And I think that's pretty much, it was in 2011, and I think that's the only post that my father posted on the web. Anyway, so I replied saying that I was traveling and I was going to call them right away. So I had to step out of a meeting and I called them. Next, please. Okay, so more seriously, and more importantly for the social web, this is an example of the evolution of the web from being, as I said, sort of traditional content, documents. This is an article from Al Jazeera English, with whom I was collaborating when I was in Qatar. And all these traditional content websites had realized is that they needed to add, a social component. They needed to add a part where they could collect social signals. And this has become, totally ubiquitous today, where you're invited to comment on an article, you're invited to share it with friends, right? And this has drawn a lot of traffic to these websites, and it's something that they realized very early on. Next slide, please. So for this one article, for example, there were over 1,500 comments that were posted, and this is a typical picture that shows that the article is at the center, and then all around it there are the very first comments, and then each thread is actually people responding to each other. And that's very typical of the Arab world, where commenting and talking to each other, is sort of like an outlet, right, for social relationships, right, between people. Next slide, please. So, okay, obviously, I looked up, what's going on here very briefly, and this is WebKnis. That's another example of user-generated content, or of the social web, where people have classifieds that are organized under very different number of categories, and there's a lot of activity going on here where people actually generate content. Next. Another example is Flickr, right? Flickr is owned by Yahoo, and again on Flickr one can upload pictures and tag them. So I looked up, Algeria, Kasbah, and you get to see all these different beautiful pictures of the Kasbah. Okay? Next. So the two questions that are going to form also the outline of my talk are the following. The first question is a research question mainly, how to design useful systems on the social web, right? And what useful means depends on who are we talking about, right? So useful to end users means, with relevant content, right? Why would you go to any website today if it doesn't have relevant content, customized content, right? Useful for analysts, or what we call today data scientists, is relevant insights, right? How can I use the social web to learn about people, right? People on the web, but also to learn about people's interests. The second question I'm going to try and answer is how to improve users' contributions on the social web, right? So how to optimize, or how, if we want to talk in technical terms, how to optimize their presence, the time they're spending on the web. Next, so for the first question. So here is the reason why it's important and useful to draw insights from the social web, right? So this is a piece of work that a friend of mine has been doing in New York, and he has a startup called Social Flow. And what that startup does, it does tweet analysis, and this simply shows that the tweets that are related to Al Jazeera, this is an aggregation. This was, during the Egypt revolution, So this is simply an aggregation, it's like a tag cloud, right? So the aggregation number of tweets, the size of the circle simply is proportional to the number of tweets around some word, right? So clearly what this shows is that around the same time, the audience that followed Al Jazeera had very different interests from the audience that followed Fox News, right? It was around the time there was Obamacare and, you know, Tariq Palin and other things, while, you know, obviously the tweets that were mentioning Al Jazeera were more concerned about what was happening in the region. Next. Here's another example also of insights that could be drawn to provide information on, understand better, right, what the audience is. This is probably a movie that you have heard about. We've all heard about this movie. So that's a Moroccan movie and a recent one. If you look at just the average rating of this movie on IMDb, it's slightly above average, right? So the ratings go at a scale of 1 to 10. And this one has an average of 6. Next, please. But then if you start diving into it, you realize that this average has actually, does not reflect the underlying population, right? So it's an average that's been computed from a very polarized set of reviewers, right? So there is about the same number of people who absolutely adored this movie, gave it 8 to 10 rating, and the same number as the ones that have given it a 1 rating. Okay, so that's sort of an example of why it matters to actually mine and understand the user segments on the social web. Next. Here's another example for why is it that it matters and why is it that it's important, and this is particularly to serve relevant content to end users, right? So I'm going to say next 3 times because I need all of the next. Here you go, thank you. So this is an example of how we can take raw user content, right? So these are pictures from Flickr, all the way at the top, and then all the way at the bottom here, you can see trip itineraries, reconstructed itineraries of people who've taken those pictures, okay? So how did this work? Basically taking pictures, for example, let me try and build itineraries in Algiers, okay? So I'd be taking pictures from Flickr that were uploaded by people in Algiers. Then I'll go and find all the ones whose latitude, longitude, or is in Algiers, or the ones that have been tagged with Algiers or related terms. And I can also sort them by creation period, or creation time. Then I can take every one of these pictures and automatically, without doing any image processing, map each picture with a point of interest. Okay? I go on Wikipedia, I go on different sources, I can go, that gives me information about the latitude, longitude, the points of interest in Algiers. Okay? So, La Place des Martyrs, Jama Chewa, and different places. And that allows me to do this mapping, okay, which would give me the second layer. And then the last one, in the last layer, all I need to do is look at the first picture taken somewhere and the last picture taken at the same place and compute the difference. That gives me an estimation of how much time someone has spent at that place. And then I can reconstruct people's itineraries. This becomes a rich mine of information, going from raw user data generated on the social web to travel itineraries that then I can query. I can have all sorts of, so you were telling me earlier about needing to have systems that to which you would give a start point, an end point, and that would automatically give you a suggested itinerary. Next. Okay, so here's just an example of an itinerary. At the time, it was when I was at Yahoo, that we'd extracted for New York City. I mean, this is a really rough itinerary, okay? So it's a 12-hour itinerary, and you would be starting at ground zero, ending at ground zero, and then traveling different places in New York. Of course, it requires, and this was totally, completely automatically generated from pictures that were taken in New York City. And this obviously would require some post-processing to make it more user-friendly or even like human-friendly, right? But it gives you a sense if you look at the time it takes to go from one place to the next, at the logic of this itinerary, because it's been aggregated from so many pictures that were uploaded, it's actually an itinerary that makes sense. You'd be spending some time southern Manhattan and then going back up, northern part and slightly north, and then, anyway, so it's just an example of useful information that could be extracted for end users. Okay, the second piece that I mentioned is, so this was all about, mining and understanding generated content on the social web. The second one was about, how do we make people contribute better content? Okay, and this is where I want to talk about crowdsourcing. That's sort of a relatively recent phenomenon. And the most well-known system or website is Amazon Mechanical Turk. So what's that? Amazon Mechanical Turk is a platform where requesters that have jobs or tasks, or what we call micro-tasks, post those tasks online, and then people act as workers, and they're hired for those tasks. Okay? There's a variety of such tasks. Next one. So on AMT, on Mechanical Turk, this is how the task, when you log in, this is how the tasks look like. There's a number of information about each task, the expiration, how much it pays, a number of other details. It's not important to know what the details are. Next. But here's an example of a recent task that I extracted from there. This is image recognition, or more specifically, receipt classification. So you're shown a picture of a receipt, and you're asked to fill out a form, okay? And this first page of the form tells you, it asks you information about the business, the name of the businesses, the phone number, the address, a number of things, right? And clearly humans are much better at this than computers, okay? Then the next steps are going to be about the names of the products and how much they cost, okay? And why is this so important? It's because one of the fields in computer science is machine learning, where you need a lot of examples, okay? Positive and negative examples of receipts, examples of something that's not a receipt, and then your algorithm learns to automatically recognize from this labeled data, automatically recognize a receipt, okay? And up to now, before crowdsourcing existed, people had to do it by hand, and the sample sets, the labeled sets, were very, very small. The ability to deploy these tasks online and have anyone fill out the information, okay, has tremendously helped increase the size of those sets, okay, and so increase the accuracy of automatic recognition algorithms. Okay. Yeah, so we also used this platform to evaluate the itineraries that we had extracted. The itineraries had been extracted automatically, and we had deployed questionnaires, like this one, to evaluate the quality of the extracted itineraries. Next one. Okay. But of course, in order to be able to evaluate that, we needed to check the people's qualification for the job, right? So this is a typical thing that people do in crowdsourcing. When you're deploying a job and you're requiring a number of skills, or qualifications, you need to deploy other jobs or other tasks that people have to pass, okay? Or other tests that people have to pass. So this is an example of how we did it. So these are 3 pictures in New York City, and we simply asked people to recognize, some of them are very well known, others are not as well known, and this was a qualification test before workers, right, participants, were able to move to the next step, right, and evaluate itineraries. So this constitutes great potential on the web. It constitutes great potential for a number of things, and in particular for research, right? Because now we're making people's contributions better, right? We're making them serve a certain purpose, and it's also used quite a bit in the humanitarian world, where people are asked to go and take pictures, right? Go report on an incident, and put that, on some website or okay. Okay, so this is I told you about work that has been done, right? And I have another 3 slides to tell you about some open questions. right? So remember, my two main questions were how to make the social web more useful, or actually helpful to users. And then my second question was how to improve people's contributions on the web. And let me briefly tell you about this, some of the work that we're doing with my team about the first question and the second one. So about the first question, we're diving a little bit more finely and deeper into who are these people on the web who are, rating movie, for example. Okay. So next slide. So here's one of the segments, for example, user segments that we're able to find. For the movie Titanic, everyone knows that it has gotten a relatively high rating, 7.4. But if we dive more deeply into who are these users, who are these people who rated this movie, we find user segments, right? And the user segment that has absolutely loved this movie, and surprisingly, is teenage female reviewers, right, who have rated it 9.2 or higher. Okay? So the ability to find these segments in the range of possible segments that are out there is known to be a computationally hard problem, right? For those those of you who know about algorithms, it's actually an NP-hard algorithm to go and, for any possible movie or any possible user item rating, go and find all the people who liked it, all the people who didn't like it, automatically, right, from the data set, is something that is very hard. So one has to develop specialized algorithms to find these, simply because the combination of all possible people, all possible user dimensions, right, is extremely high. It's actually exponential in the number of possible values, and also because these user segments are very different depending on what the underlying data set is, right? For this movie, maybe it's the young teenage females. For another movie, it would be guys, and so on and so forth, okay? Next. Okay, so basically, what are the, so the second point, so the second one was about how to improve users' contributions on the web, people's contributions on the web. And one of the new trends in crowdsourcing is what's being called worker-centric crowdsourcing. So if you remember, the one that I mentioned earlier was about helping requesters post tasks and hiring a workforce, right, to come and complete some tasks. So what we're doing these days is to look at how to, as if basically it's like having a service, right, for anyone on the web, to go and find the most appropriate, the most relevant piece of work to do, the most relevant micro-task. Okay? So we're looking into questions that are shifting workers from being passive workers to being more active workers. You come in, you have a number of qualifications, you provide your qualifications, and here you go, here are the tasks that require attention. Okay? So there's a number of algorithmic challenges there that are really exciting. And yeah, so then I was thinking maybe this other piece, So in fact, for example, one of the things that would be interesting eventually here, if some of you are looking for ideas, what to do on the social web, and in particular if you're looking for internship, or there are a number of things that could be interesting sort of in the whole data science space. One is extracting touristic itineraries from Flickr, Instagram, all sorts of geotag data in Algeria, right, in order to then be used potentially in combination with data from Etusa to recommend some itineraries, right? So this is a typical sort of data fusion or big data problem where one would use different data sources, put them together, and provide value. What else? Yeah, so the other thing is that I think one of the things that was mentioned by the previous speakers, I think Jennifer was mentioning that, is this a better understanding of the market segments, right? So better understanding of what do people need, right? And so one of the things that mining user segments from the web could help with right, is to be able to simply take all this data, right, from multiple data sources and extract relevant segments, relevant meaning, you know, instructed by some data scientist or analyst, right? Go and find me people who are in a certain age range, who are interested in, you know, some web pages and so on, and who have some qualifications, or, you know, doing some market studies or to find market segments is something that is of great interest to researchers in data science today. Obviously, all of this requires a tight collaboration between people who, you know, have data ownership, and so they have the power, and people who basically come from academia or, you know, design algorithms, or, and because here one of the shifts that happened in recent years is, you know, data has become the currency. Data has become, you know, the power, right? And that's why sort of a tight collaboration between academia and industry is needed. And with this slide, I thank you very much. Any questions? Can people have a microphone here? There's a table in the front.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Juba. I'm a student in the Higher School of Computer Science, ex-ENI. So my question is about hashtag. You know, I want just to have some information more about hashtag, please. Concerning the first question, your important question. Thank you.
Okay. So hashtags actually are a way of lightly structuring posts from individuals, right? So they're not always necessary. So if you have a good text mining algorithm, you can take any piece of text, right? And you can say things about it. You can say, you know, what are the topics that are being talked about in this piece of text? What is the sentiment? You know, one of the work we did when I was in Qatar, we looked at the sentiment that was expressed in article comments on Al Jazeera English, and we looked at how it evolved over time in different regions of the world, right? So that's something you can do without hashtags. What hashtags have brought is, by putting a specific hashtag, you're basically declaring that your statement is going to be about some topic, right? But there's a lot of hidden data out there that's not prefixed or postfixed with a hashtag, right? And that may be talking about that one topic, right? So that's why we need more work in figuring out, in basically extracting hidden topics from people's discourse. I hope this answered your question. Sorry, I'm not looking at you in the eyes because I can't really see the audience very well. But,
do you have any more questions?
Yes, hi, my name is Rona Shahati, and I'm with TechWadi. We facilitate investments for startups from the region in Silicon Valley. And thank you very much for the insightful presentation. How much do you know about, or do you know of data science and data analytics companies in the region who are prime for investment? And this is the first question. And the second question is, you talk a lot about the research academically. What about its applications in the market? And also maybe if you can touch on applications in government.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm actually not really aware of what's going on here. So it's also a question I have. I've just met someone who has a startup. She's sitting somewhere at that table. She's the one who mentioned this whole idea of, she worked with Etusa, that's the transportation agency here, a transportation company, and it took her a while to convince them to share data about different bus stops, and in order to then come up, with some methods, of recommending itineraries and things like that. Okay, So I think it's really the early stages from a data science viewpoint here. So no, I'm not aware of any startup that's prime for investment. I'm sorry to say that. Then to come back to your other question, which has to do with, if I understood it well, it's the question of, what's the status of data science and data analytics in the practical world or in industry. Okay, so I can speak for my experience, at least in France, where I've been for 3.5 years. And I think one of the things that people are not very comfortable with yet, or not understanding yet, is that they need to get to a point where they need to share their data, right? Or they need to provide ways to attract, minds or attract people to work on their data sets. So that's related to sort of government data. There have been a lot of initiatives in open data initiatives. Of course, it's more advanced in the US. It's slightly less advanced in France. Okay, I don't know where it is here. I was told. I asked a few people. I was told it's not really available, like open data. But then going back to my experience in France, there's still sort of this traditional relationship to data that is, if I own data, I know I have power, and people don't necessarily easily sort of comply with, or don't project themselves into this. If I give a little bit of my data, then I'm going to get some value, then I can attract more people to work on it. And in some of the projects that I have that are with people in industry, in France, it took us several months before we could convince people to share their data. Okay, but it's also because there are no clear regulations or good understanding, right, of how to share your data and how to make it available, sort of without fearing that someone uses it, against you. So I'm not exactly answering your question. But this is what I know. I saw another hand, yeah.
Hi again.
Yes.
So I have two questions as well. The first one is, how do you see the evolution of the role of the active UGCs, active user-generated content, in providing this, how do you say it, like the supervised learning in machine learning, right? How do you see the role? Because at some point we're going to have big enough data sets and we can go with unsupervised learning. How do you see the evolution of the active user-generated content? Because today we have a passive user. When you use Waze, your smartphone is giving you GPS and it's working and you are filling in the data set. So how do you see the evolution of an active one when I have to do this micro task? Especially that on the business micro tasks, it's not a viable model as it's low income, and at some point the income is going to come up enough in India and China and the third world countries providing this human pool. And my second question is, as a researcher in the CNRS, how are you seeing the impact of the legal framework or the lack of legal framework on your work, especially regarding privacy? I don't know, maybe with CNIL or whatever organization has the role to do so, or with all these privacy concerns we have today.
Yeah, thank you for this question. So I'm going to answer the second one first. In fact, today, people don't quite understand very well the privacy breaches that one could have, especially by merging data from different sources. Okay, so you have some people react very. There are actually really two extremes. There's one extreme that doesn't want to share anything. Okay, but they also know that if they don't share anything, their data is not going to be exploited by others, and they're going to stay back. And the others are ones who don't quite understand, what the privacy ramifications or privacy risks are, and they give you everything, right? And so I'll give you an example. I work with on a project with Intermarché in France. That's sort of like a grocery store. It's like a retailer, and there are 1,800 of them. And this is the example that it took us forever before they agreed to give us some data, right? So of course they said, how can I give you data on what people are buying in my stores and their loyalty card carte de fidélité, and you will infer everything about them and, you know, privacy breach, okay? It turns out, you know, we started with data that's out there on the web, and we showed them that with that data that's not theirs, we were able to gain some insights. Very simple things, right? Turning knobs, right? Very simple visualization. You know, I want to find out about people who are interested in this product. I want to find out about people who are interested in this one and not this other one, right? So these are very simple mining algorithms, and they started seeing the value of that, right? And because we're from academia, they were willing to share their data. Okay, so it's a very delicate matter. There are no. So I was in Zurich just a few days ago. We were evaluating projects that are funded by the SNF, Swiss National Fund, and they're big data projects. There are 3 different kinds. One is, you know, advancing the state of science, so it's algorithms, models. Another one is applications, and then the 3rd category is ethical, law, ethics, right, of data. Okay, and you read those, right? These are pre-proposals, just a few pages. You read those, and you feel that it's still not mature. You feel that, you know, technology and science have sort of are growing really fast, right? And all these sort of like creating boundaries, legal boundaries, is something that's trying to follow, right? But there are no best practices of sharing data today. Okay. Now, for your second point, that has to do with how do I see the evolution of these sort of crowdsourcing platforms, or at least, you know, getting people to label data, for example, right, for in the context of learning or supervised learning. So there's a number of things, right? So one has to do with it depends on what you're trying to learn, right? You could be trying to learn something about the data itself. Okay, and I think that's what you meant maybe. But there's a whole field out there that hasn't been explored that is learning something about people, right? Based on the tasks that they've already completed so far. Okay, so I agree with you. If we were to have just a single statement about this, we would say yes, wages are increasing in the part of the world that participates the most in these platforms, China, India, and others. Okay, and so these platforms are not going to survive. But if I start looking and breaking that down, right, into tasks that require highly specialized individuals, okay, these tasks are actually very well paid, right? These tasks are a source of revenue for about 30% of the tech population in Bangalore, for example. Okay, so I think from a technical viewpoint, there's a lot to be done in, you know, sort of a better understanding of what are these subset of workers, you know, what are the worker segments out there, and how much to compensate them for it, for the work they would be willing to provide. So this, if we have the vision of wanting to stay with this supervised, you know, I need, you know, some data and I need but there is another aspect to the question that has to do with the ethics, the labor work, right, the labor ethics in different countries. So in France, for example, they just recently passed a law or something that I think makes you illegal anyways if you do it, if you don't respect it. It's their mechanical Turk is not accessible from France, right? And if you were to bring people over and make them work, right, you cannot do it via Mechanical Turk, because Mechanical Turk recommends to pay $6 an hour for a micro task, and that is not compliant with the French labor law. But things have been changing, right? I have a colleague who just published a book, right, on the ethics of crowdsourcing, right, and where he was actually recommending, you know, to determine the reward, right, based on some regulations, based on the qualifications of workers, you know, things like that. So I don't know where he's going to go. Yeah, I think what's happening is that because it's completely multidisciplinary and it requires, you know, to change a number of things, but also develop algorithms, it's sort of still out there.
Right. I think I saw another hand right behind your table. Yeah. Oh, I have more questions. Perfect. Who has the mic? You have it?
All right. My name is Aziz Bouskin, wildlife field engineer with Baker here in North Africa. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was quite informative and insightful. Concerning the source crowding, the first idea, it's quite a good idea to have people involved in this industry, to make them proactive instead of being passive users. But don't you think there's a challenge here in bringing people attentions to this kind of business? There's a challenge here. How do you expect people to know more about this? And how are you going to figure out a solution, how you can grab their attention and how you can motivate them to join the business? And the second question is, what do you think is going to be the added value if you implement this project? What's going to be the added value for the web page owners, the companies themselves? And thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. So I think I don't see this as a challenge. In particular here, I see this more as an opportunity. In the sense that, you know, learning from what people have done before, I mean, it's an opportunity because one could, you know, shape up the way crowdsourcing could evolve here, right? It could be designed, today it can be designed from the ground up, and it can be designed by using what has been learned from other experiences in the following sense. For example, you know, pushing for a better pay, or you know, hiring, deploying a platform that serves academia, right? Or you know, something like Mechanical Turk is completely general purpose, right? So it's not for some specific, or for the, like in the humanitarian world. And for example, I have a friend who was at the UN who's been pushing for a platform called Ushahidi. You know, all know Arabic, sort of it means witness, in fact in Swahili. And that platform is very much used for reporting, you know, whatever, something happening. It was used a lot in the Haiti earthquake, you know, to report what was happening. So in fact, I think if we were to completely start from scratch again, we would design platforms that are dedicated, right, to specific domains or to specific goals, right? And a humanitarian platform, for example, doesn't necessarily need to compensate people with money. Okay, so you would do it anyway. So that was one question. And then you had another point which I completely forgot.
You can remind us.
Yeah, I said what's going to be the added value.
Oh yeah, the added value. I guess I forgot it because I don't really know. But anyways, what's the added value of crowdsourcing, you're saying? So the added value of studying user segments or studying your audience is obviously, you know, instead of getting sort of averages, right? Or what's the name of that Google Analytics? You know, like if you have a website, then you can basically get all this information about traffic, right? It tells you, you know, how much retention, what's the retention percentage, you know, of your website, meaning, you know, do people actually keep clicking on your website? Do you just show up and leave? Where do people come from, right, when they connect to your website, right? This kind of analytics. All these analytics don't give you any information about who those people are, right? What age group they are, gender, and all sorts of things like that, right? So the opportunity of the studying user segments, mining user segments, is in gaining a better understanding of who your audience is, okay? And that should help you design your website better, okay? So that's one aspect. What's the opportunity of crowdsourcing for your website? Let's see. If I were to design a website, yeah, I don't exactly know. I mean, it could be something that has to do more with. Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to see, you know, direct connection. So there's more, it's a more of a connection with understanding your traffic, understanding the user segments. Yeah. There was a question here.
Yeah, I saw more hands. Susan, I think, yeah.
Hello, yeah.
Yes.
So I loved your talk. I loved every slide. I had a comment on every slide. But just to restrict myself, first I wanted to publicize the W3C, which is an organization run by Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the web. It's headquartered at MIT. What they have a working group called Best Practices for Sharing Data on the Web. It's the latest draft is January 2016, and it's a very active group, and it covers a number of topics. So I really think that is a group that's working very hard to create best practices for sharing data on the web. The question I wanted to ask you is, if I were a student now, what would you recommend I should study to become you? To be as successful as you in this field? What should be my path?
Okay. There are many, many different paths, in fact. And I'm not the only one in this field. A lot of people out there. So, let's see. So I think today, because data science is growing and it's something that needs a lot of attention, I would recommend to students who want to stay in these disciplines, STEM, in the STEM world, I would recommend to study algorithms and machine learning. These would be like the main things. But then, because data science requires collaboration from the different people, for example, I work with a sociologist, right? And what the sociologist helps me with is figure out what's relevant to people, right? I mean, I can design algorithms, but I don't always know what people want. I don't know what. So one of the things we're working on is how to formalize workers' motivation on crowdsourcing, right? What motivates people? And there is a whole, there was a study in the 70s on, motivation is extrinsic, intrinsic to the job, and all sorts of things that we're trying to formalize. I think there are two things maybe that I would recommend, is to sort of learn these hard sciences, learn how to code, learn algorithms, right? Learn how to formalize things, but also get your hands dirty with data, because, there's so many insights could be both, from, added value, learning things from the data, but also in terms of how to better design algorithms to mine data. So that would be my recommendation. Thanks for asking this question.
All right, maybe you have time for one more question, because we have to wrap up the session. Do you have any more questions? I thought I saw more hands. No? Okay. All right, well, thank you, Sihem, for your talk. Thank you all for your questions as well. I hope you're going to keep up with your energy after the lunch break that's starting now. So you should take about an hour's time break, and we will see you shortly. Meet one another, hang out.